Okay, so welcome everyone to today's Registration and Mentorship in Ontario webinar. Thank you for being here. I'll be one of your panelists today. My name is Colleen Myrie. I'm the Director of Registration Services here at the college. Also with me today is Smita Joglekar. She is the Audiology Advisor and Manager of Mentorship, and Jennifer Cupit. She is the International Applications Coordinator. Smita and I will be presenters, and Jennifer will be our backup, just in case we have any technical difficulties today. So our agenda today will include the following. Whoops. We will be looking at the Canadian Entry to Practice exam, good character, becoming a CASLPO registrant, both the application and registration processes, and mentorship. We will have 2 question breaks during the webinar. The first will be after the registration portion of the webinar, so after section 3, and then we'll have a 4th break after the webinar section. So those will be the 2 question breaks, and we will have a Q&A box where you can put your questions for us, and our moderator, Jessica, who isn't on camera, she will be choosing the questions to be answered during our question breaks. And if you miss anything today, or you have any technical problems of your own, we will be recording this webinar, along with we'll be posting the slides as well on our website later. So we also have a handout that you can download as well to help you with the registration process. So let's get started. The Canadian Entry to Practice exam. The Canadian Entry to Practice exam is a national standardized competency-based entry to practice exam for audiologists and speech-language pathologists. The proposed amendments to CASLPO's registration regulation will include a new requirement for all applicants to pass. The acronym is the CETP exam. And CASLPO will only require applicants to pass the CETP exam after our amendments to the registration regulation are approved by the Ministry of Health. The amendments to CASLPO's registration regulation have not been approved yet. CASLPO's council has also decided they will not require successful completion of the CETP exam until April 1st, 2021. So what this means is that any applicant whose completed application is received by CASLPO prior to April 1st, 2021, they will not have to write the CETP exam to be registered in Ontario. This will apply even if the amendments to CASLPO's registration regulation have been approved before April 1st of 2021. So the Canadian Alliance of Audiology and Speech Language Pathology Regulators, the acronym is CASPR, is responsible for implementation of the CETP exam. And CASPR's website includes information about applying for the CETP exam. What we would say is that if you are applying to Ontario, the information from CASPER's website may differ from the information provided on CASLPO's website. So if you're applying for registration in Ontario, you must obtain information about registration in Ontario and the CETP exam from CASLPO's website. If you're applying for registration in another province, we recommend that you consult with that province's regulatory body about any requirements for registration, as well as any requirements to write the CETP exam. So before we, I guess when we set up this webinar, we did ask for people to send some questions in advance, and we got a few. And one of them was, will my exam results expire after a certain amount of time? So yes, the exam results will expire after a certain amount of time. CASLPO has not set that limit yet, but we anticipate that those results will expire within 2 to 3 years. You know, I think by April 1st of 2021, these details will be set, and we will publish what those limits are. Our second question is, after meeting the requirements for issuance of an initial certificate and passing the CETP exam, can a new graduate register with CASLPO as a non-practicing registrant? I think this applicant was thinking that they would do everything and then, but they wouldn't necessarily work in Ontario yet, so they would just be non-practicing for when they first become registered. And the answer to that is that in order to be a to have a non-practicing certificate, the applicant must be either must be eligible for a general certificate or hold a general certificate. And to hold a general certificate with CASLPO, you have to have completed at least 750 hours of patient care or related work in the profession within the last 3 years, or you must have completed CASLPO's mentorship program. So as a new graduate, you would not be able to obtain a non-practicing certificate with CASLPO. So our next section is about good character. What is it? You can see from the word cloud, words like honesty, fair, resolved, reasonable, sincere. Well, good character has a specific meaning within CASLPO's registration regulation. Actually, Section 3 of that regulation has a whole bunch of requirements, and they have to do with criminal conduct, any misconduct that you might have done if you were a member of other professions or had practiced in another jurisdiction. We have a Section 6 within that Section 3 that also talks about the applicant's past and present conduct. And basically, when you're making an application, the college has to be sure that either you don't have a physical or mental condition or disorder that could affect your ability to practice the profession safely. We have to be sure that you will practice the profession with decency, integrity, and honesty, and in accordance with the law. And we have to make sure that the applicants display appropriate professional attitudes. So we have a scenario for you, kind of plucked from the headlines. A group of male dentistry students at Dalhousie University posted sexually violent comments about female classmates on their Facebook group page. And the comments on the Facebook page became public, and the university suspended the 13 students who were members of this group. So, oops, sorry, went too far. We're going to do a poll, and we're asking what should the registration committee do to, if they receive applications from one of these students. So we have 4 options. Either they can issue a certificate of registration, they can issue a certificate of registration if the applicant successfully completes additional training specified by the panel, something like a sexual harassment and awareness and prevention training, or they could refuse to issue a certificate of registration, or none of the above.
Just launch the poll.
So if you could respond, that would be great.
Okay, we have some responses that have come through. Yeah, we're getting more now. Okay. We're at about 30% of people who have put in a response. So I'll just give a couple more seconds and then I'll close the poll.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to close the poll now and just share the results.
Okay, great. So we see that there are a few people that have said that we should issue the certificate. Some have said refuse. So basically the response is that the registration committee can do any of those things, and the conduct does not necessarily bar the applicant from registration, but it does trigger an inquiry into the applicant's suitability to practice. So when the registration committee is looking at this, they will assess each application on a case-by-case basis, and the committee would want to know what the applicant's conduct was and the details of the conduct before a decision could be made about registration. So, you know, they're looking at what the applicant did, the nature of the conduct, and basically if the applicant had done anything after that conduct happened to, I guess, like resolve it themselves, like maybe they had gone to counseling themselves and they presented that evidence. So they're looking at the entire applicant's conduct before and after this happened to determine whether or not they'd be suitable for registration. So we would go on to registration with CASLPO and how do you become registered. So it's important to note about regulated professionals that it is registration with CASLPO and not the university degree in audiology or speech language pathology that gives the legal authority to use the titles audiologist, speech language pathologist, speech therapist, or any abbreviation or variation of these titles, and to provide audiology or speech language pathology services in Ontario. So we always say that self-regulation is a privilege and not a right. When you register with CASLPO, you are joining the company of all other regulated professionals in the province. That includes nurses, doctors, lawyers, engineers. And we think it's just a really big deal. So we have another scenario for you. We have our applicant, Mia. She has completed her master's degree in speech language pathology at University X and plans to work in Ontario, but she is not a registrant of CASLPO yet. So Mia decides to create a LinkedIn profile. Sorry. So this is Mia's LinkedIn profile. She indicates that she is a speech language pathologist, pre-registered in the Ottawa, Canada area. And she says, I am a pre-registered speech language pathologist based in Ontario. I have excellent communication skills and pride myself on my ability to develop a rapport with clients and their families. So is the information on Mia's LinkedIn profile acceptable according to the college's regulations? Yes or no? And we will pull up a poll.
Just waiting for a few more responses. Okay, we've got about 50% of people who have voted, 60%, so I'll close the poll now.
All right. So most of you have said no. So, oops. We're trying, so we're going to just show you what the problem is. So as you can see, Mia is using the protected title, which is speech language pathologist. She has used pre-registered, but it says that you cannot use any variation of that title as well. So she's still, that's still wrong. And so again, in the summary, she reiterates that she is pre-registered and based in Ontario. So that is something that you cannot do, and the college would send me a cease and desist letter. So we then have our application process, which in order to become registered with CASLPO as a new graduate, the college would offer an initial certificate of registration. And so those graduates would have to fulfill all of the college's registration requirements. And it's also, the initial certificate is offered to those with less than 2 years of professional experience in an unregulated province or in another country. So you're becoming registered. Where do you start? The first thing you do is, of course, you have to apply. So a new graduate must obtain an initial certificate application form for Canadian graduates. And so you would go to our website, and you could click on the button for applicants, and you'll see this menu here called Apply to the College. And then you'll get to the page, which is Path 1, And you would click on Canadian graduates to get to Path 1. And then here you'll see a place where you can download the Canadian application guide for initial registration. The next thing that you will have to do is submit official transcripts of your graduate program. So typically, CASLPO requires official transcripts to be sent directly to the college from your university. What is an official transcript? So an official transcript is an academic record that includes all the course names as well as the credit received for each successfully completed course, and it's sent directly by mail to CASLPO in a university sealed signature stamped envelope. So we've made some adjustments during this pandemic. So we have recognized that some universities have shut down their transcript departments. So if you are unable to obtain an official transcript due to shutdowns of your university offices, CASLPO is temporarily accepting unofficial transcripts. And after the pandemic subsides, the college will require all the applicants who submitted an unofficial transcript to submit an official transcript to the college. So what is an unofficial transcript? So the unofficial transcript must include the name of the academic institution, the applicant's name, and indicate all the course names as well as the credits received for each completed course. So an unofficial transcript may be one of the following. It could be an academic record obtained from your institution that doesn't bear the registrar's signature, nor is it printed on security paper. It could be a hard copy of the original transcript that is not in a university sealed envelope. And it could also be an electronic transcript that is printed and then rescanned in an email. So it's just noted to say that if your transcript has been, if you received an official transcript and opened it, it no longer is an official transcript. A sealed transcript has to be opened by the college for it to be considered official. We also require that if you are submitting an application and your degree has not been conferred yet, so you've completed your program, but your degree, it takes a few months for it to be awarded. We need to get a letter from your program director just stating that you've completed your master's degree program and verifying the date that your degree will be conferred. This letter cannot be a photocopy, and it must bear an original signature if you're sending it to us in your application. We also require that you submit proof of either Canadian citizenship, which can be a copy of your Canadian birth certificate, a valid passport, or both sides of Canadian citizenship card, permanent resident status. So if you have a permanent resident card, you would do a photocopy of both sides, or a record of landing. Or if you have Canadian employment authorization, we would need a copy of that valid Canadian work permit. We also have an application fee, which is $150 that must be submitted as well. And we would say that we do need originals of university transcripts, so they have to be sent if they're Official transcripts, they have to be sent in the university sealed envelopes, and the letter from the program director. We do accept these letters if they're emailed directly to the college from the university. So. All of those documents are what would make a complete application. So how long does this process take? So once the application form is received, it takes about 15 business days or 3 weeks for us to review your documentation and to send you an email confirmation. In this email, we will let you know which documents have been received and if any are outstanding. The review process may take up to 5 business days to complete unless an issue has been identified. So it takes about 3 weeks to just get a letter from us acknowledging that we've received your application and what documents we have. And then once we have a completed application, it might take about another 5 business days for us to review your application and issue or let you know whether or not you've met all the requirements for registration. So we have another scenario for you. Mia is concerned that her courier company didn't send her application package properly. Should Mia contact the college to confirm the receipt of her application? Yes or no? So that's another polling question.
Waiting for the responses to come in.
Okay.
Okay, we've got about 60% of people who have voted, so I'll close the poll and I'll share the results.
Okay, so it's a split. Most have said no and some have said yes. So what we would say is, oops, no. So the reason why we would say no is that the college has set these timelines, and we're committed to processing applications as quickly as possible in order that each application is in the order that each application is received and completed. We just ask that you refrain from calling to check on the status of your application because it slows down our process significantly. Applications are placed in a queue for processing once the college has confirmed that the application package is complete. And during the COVID pandemic, there have been certain things that we have instituted, such as there are no walk-in visits being accepted at the college at this time. The college is currently operating a virtual office, so as you can see, everybody is at home. But all of CASLPO's registration services will continue to be provided. So you will get those responses from us, and we answer any questions that you have and process applications. Although application process timelines may require adjustment during this period, and their delays might be possible. So we just request your patience if you experience any delays in responses or to calls or emails or processing times. So we have another poll. Mia calls Jessica LaForette, who is our program assistant at the college, and says, "I have been offered a dream job and the employer says, I need to start in 2 weeks. I'm just about to submit my application to CASLPO. If I'm not registered in 2 weeks, I will lose this job opportunity. Should CASLPO push this application to the top of the queue so that she may start her employment in time? Yes or no?
Just waiting for. Okay, I'm going to close the poll.
Okay, so we have 90% yes, or no, sorry, 90% of you have said no, and 10% have said yes. Oops. Okay, so the answer is no. CASLPO must provide an impartial, transparent, and fair process for all applicants, as required by the Office of the Fairness Commissioner of Ontario. So if we were to advance Mia's file because this is her dream opportunity, it would be unfair to others, maybe you, who submitted your application earlier and maybe also waiting for your dream job. Oops, I think I went the wrong way. So, oh, hold on. Sorry. I think Mia's potential employer calls Jessica Laforette and says, I would like to hire this graduating student for a position we have, and we need her to start in 2 weeks. Otherwise, the children at the center will not be getting service that they are entitled to. Should CASLPO push this file to the top of the queue so that she can start her employment in time? Yes or no?
We've got 4% of people who have responded. I'll just wait a few more seconds. Okay.
Okay, so we do have a lot of no's. And you're right. CASLPO must provide an impartial, transparent, and fair process for all applicants. Again, if we advance Mia's file because the children in that center would not receive service, it would be unfair to other applicants who submit their application earlier and who may be ready to begin working with other individuals who will not be receiving service. So the moral of the story is that there is no line jumping. We just ask you to plan ahead and speak to potential employers about the application and registration process, and let them know the timelines. We have them printed on our website, and you know, be clear that it's not possible for CASLPO to expedite any applications. So CASLPO has the application review process, and that's where a completed application is assessed by a member of the college's staff to determine whether or not all of the registration requirements have been met. And if your application is approved, you will be notified by email that you are eligible for registration with CASLPO. And so we will move from the application process into the registration process. So the registration process begins after the application process is successful. And so you will receive an initial certificate registration form from CASLPO's program assistant after your application has been reviewed and you were deemed eligible for registration. So in order to complete the registration process and become an initial registrant, you must secure an offer of employment in Ontario to work as an audiologist or speech language pathologist. So you have to have that job offer before you can complete the registration process. In order to complete the registration process, you must complete the initial certificate registration form, and the registration form must be received by CASLPO at least 5 business days ahead of your employment start date. Oops, sorry. That initial certificate registration form includes your mentor's name, so you have to know who your mentor will be. You also include your employment start date. So that's the date that you expect to start working as an audiologist or a speech language pathologist. If you don't know, you can always put pending completion of registration as a filler in that spot, but if you do know, you should put the date. We also ask for your employment information, so that includes your business address and your business telephone of your proposed employer. We also require that you have professional liability insurance coverage, and you have to provide us with the carrier name, the policy certificate number, and the policy expiration date. And you must have coverage of at least $2 million per claim for professional liability. If you are looking for professional liability insurance coverage, some employers actually provide insurance coverage for all of their employees. So that's something that you should ask if you are talking with an employer. As well, if your employer does not provide insurance, you will have to get that on your own. And if you are a member of a professional association such as SAC or OSLA or CAA, you can get insurance coverage through those associations. We also have a registration fee of $50, and you're required to pay a prorated annual fee. So the annual fee is prorated by CASLPO quarterly, and our registration year runs from October 1st to September 30th. So we have it divided up into 4 quarters, and if you become registered, say at the end of the registration period, which is the last quarter, you would have to pay that amount, and it would take you until the end of our registration period, which is September 30th, and then you would have to renew your certificate. So we have charts up on our website that show the quarterly proration amounts, and you would just go to that section. Once we receive your completed registration form, it takes about 5 business days to process that registration. So what we say is the most time for the registration process is for the application side. So if you have all of that documentation ready, submit it to us. And if you don't have a job yet, that's fine. You wait until you get a job before you do the second half, which is the registration process. So after you've completed registration, congratulations, you're now an initial registrant of CASLPO. And again, we'd like to mention that all certificates of registration must be renewed on or before October 1st, because as we noted, that registration period ends as of September 30th, and a new registration period starts on October 1st. And so you would have to renew for that registration period. So CASLPO, we have a lot of frequently asked questions on our website under Apply to the College. So we just wanted to point that out to you. If you have any questions, please look here first. And if you don't see your question, please do give us a call and we'll try and help you. So right now we're gonna throw it over to our moderator to see what kind of questions she has in our Q&A box.
All right, I actually answered a lot of them, but I do have one that I thought would be good. It's an exam question. It is, can I do the exam after, so in the next sitting, they put that in brackets, registration. Registration will be within the next few months. So I'm assuming they're saying that they're thinking they're going to be registered in the next 2 months. Can they do the exam after the sitting, like in the next sitting?
Well, there wouldn't be a reason for you to write the exam right now, because basically you would become registered. That exam is to obtain registration. And what we're saying is that you don't need to do the exam at this point if you are applying in the next few months, anytime before April 1st of 2021. And we will issue that certificate of registration without you having to pass that exam.
Okay, I have one more. Is there any way to begin at my job location prior to registration being finished? Any way at all?
We have, what we say to people is prior to registration, you cannot practice at all as a speech language pathologist or an audiologist in Ontario. However, you can work as supportive personnel. So you can work in a supportive role until your registration is issued. And we have on our website, we have a position statement talking about the use of support personnel. And that's probably a good reference point for you to see the kinds of activities that support personnel would do. And they have to be supervised by an SLP or an audiologist in order to do that role as well. So that's what you can do prior to registration, but you cannot practice.
Just having, sorry, questions are now coming in a lot. Okay, so did I already ask this one? Just want to confirm that I need an employer and a mentor to apply for registration. Did I ask that one?
Yes, so you do need both. What we say is probably the easiest course of action is to find employment first and ask your employer whether or not a mentor is available at within their organization to mentor you. And if they say yes, then That's probably the easiest route. But if they say no, then you should contact the college and we'll assist you with that process. And I'm sure Smita will talk about that in her half of the presentation.
So this is kind of a follow-up to the first question that I asked regarding writing the exam, and you had said there's no reason to because it's not. And then the reason they were asking was job competition down the road. Some people, like when the exam goes into place, they'll see that this person's written the exam. That's why they were asking.
Yeah, well, you'll find that most people who are currently registered will not have written the exam. So I'm not sure how that will fall out later, but for now it's we're not requiring the people that are currently registered to write the exam. So you'd be in their position.
I think that's it. I'm going to take care of the rest of the questions. I think it's something I can just respond to. So
Okay.
if you want to move on to the next one. Thanks.
All right. So I guess what we'll do is we will move on to, oops. There we go. So we will move on to mentorship, and I will hand over things to Smita Joglekar.
Great, thank you. I'll just turn on my webcam so everyone can hopefully see me. Okay. So hello to everybody who's watching. Again, I'm Smita Joglekar. I'm the audiology practice advisor at CASLPO, and I'm also the manager of mentorship. So I'll be telling you now about the mentorship program. So mentorship is a condition of an initial certificate of registration. So the whole first part of the presentation you listened to was how to become registered with CASLPO. And as an initial registrant, you will have an initial certificate, and you will be required, if you're an initial registrant in Ontario, to do the mentorship program. And the purpose of the mentorship is to introduce you as an initial registrant to CASLPO's quality assurance program through going through a process of filling out an online self-assessment tool and also reflecting on your practice and the practice standard and assessing your own practice to make sure that you meet the minimum practice standards of CASLPO. So let's go through the basics of the mentorship period. So the mentorship period is always a minimum of 6 months. You as the mentee must provide at least 500 hours of patient care during this time, and your mentor must provide you with at least 48 hours of guidance. And that guidance can be direct or indirect. If you look at the mentorship guidelines, you'll see more details on what is direct guidance and what is indirect. Basically, direct is a real-time video call with your mentor, for example, during this time. That might be more convenient because we are in a pandemic, or being in the same room with your mentor and having a conversation about your practice. Indirect guidance would be a phone call with your mentor, email communication, or even communication that you have through the mentorship self-assessment tool that I'll talk more about. Some direct observation is mandatory during the mentorship, and we ask that this guidance and observation be spread over time. So we recommend about 2 hours per week, or maybe 8 hours, 8 hours once a week, but we don't want you to have 5 or 6 days in succession where you're spending 8 hours a day with your mentor to receive the guidance. So you as the mentee and your mentor, you'll be completing an online tool called the Mentorship Self-Assessment Tool, or we call it the MSAT, throughout your mentorship period. And your mentors will submit a midterm and a final report to the college of your progress using the MSAT. So the mentorship period can be extended if a formal request is approved by the college, but the mentorship period typically cannot exceed 24 months. We just want to let you know that during the time of the COVID-19 pandemic, we are offering greater flexibility with granting extensions to the mentorship period, because we do know that there may be some challenges for you in completing, your 500 patient care hours, depending on how the pandemic goes as time goes on. So we are accepting and granting more extensions during this time. So let's talk a little bit about mentorship versus supervision, because there is a difference. So during the mentorship period, you as the initial registrant are accountable for all of your clinical work and decisions. So what does it mean to be accountable? What does being accountable mean? And this is not a polling question, but I'll just ask you to sort of reflect, and maybe if you have a piece of paper, you could write down, what does it mean? I mean, there's another word cloud there with a lot of words that are related to accountability. But maybe think about, how will it be different when you are a CASLPO registrant versus how it is when you're a student? What would be that difference? And basically the difference is that you are now, as a registrant of CASLPO, a professional who is expected and required to explain your actions and your decisions in your clinical practice. Like Colleen explained in the first half, it is a big deal to be registered with a regulatory body, because now the public recognizes you as a professional, as a speech language pathologist. You can use that title. You can present yourself to the public as a speech language pathologist. Your academic achievements have been, checked and verified. So with that comes that responsibility that you are now no longer supervised. You are accountable for your decisions and your clinical work. Well, what does it mean to be a professional? So professionalism is a lot of different things. It's an attitude and also a personal philosophy. If you think about people in your life who you've interacted with and you think of them as very professional, it's probably because they exhibit many of these qualities or behaviors. As a professional, you always have a desire to improve and learn. You know the limitations of your knowledge and your scope of practice. You lead rather than be a follower when you can. Doing your best even when it's challenging, that's a good one. We all have days when we're not having such a great day and it's hard, but you're always striving to do your best no matter what the challenge is. Always putting your patients first is part of being a professional, and maintaining professional boundaries. And it's also a set of behaviors, being responsible, reliable, courteous, honest, showing integrity, and of course, being accountable for your decisions and your actions. So we have a scenario for you talking about accountability and professionalism. So we have Mia, who is an initial registrant speech language pathologist, and she works as an independent contractor. So during the course of her work as an SLP, beginning of her practice, she's told by a senior colleague that consent for assessment doesn't need to be documented in the patient record, and this is incorrect. Both consent for assessment and treatment must be documented according to CASLPO standards of practice. So regrettably, a complaint is filed to CASLPO that involves Mia. And during the investigation of that complaint, patient records are reviewed, and it is confirmed that consent for assessment was not documented by Mia in the records. So Mia is asked to explain why this consent wasn't documented, and her explanation is, I was told by a senior colleague that I didn't have to document that consent, and I trusted them, and I didn't really question it. I didn't want to create tension between me and my employer, by asking too many questions, and I was new at the time and I didn't realize that this was wrong. So the question we'd like to ask you is, do you think Mia's justification for her actions and decisions is reasonable in this case? And actually, this is a polling question. So I'm going to open up the poll and just let you respond. So I can see some responses are coming through, only 2%. I'll just wait a few moments and let more people respond. Oh, there they come. Okay. Okay, so about 60% of you responded. I'll close the poll and share the results with you. So 4% have said yes, 16% have said maybe, and 80% have said no. And the answer is no. That justification from Mia would not be a reasonable justification. Being naive, at the beginning of your practice, it's not really a defense. And so that's what we mean when we're talking about that you are now accountable. If you make certain decisions in your practice, you are expected to explain why you made those decisions. And it wouldn't be a reasonable justification to say, well, I was new and I didn't know that I wasn't supposed to do that. So that's something to keep in mind, and why Colleen had said, it is a big deal to be recognized as a professional and to be a registrant with a regulatory body. And it's another reason why we have the mentorship in place, because the mentorship is really meant to support you at the beginning of your practice in Ontario, to help you understand the practice standards, but also so that you have a mentor who you can go to with questions about your practice, with questions about the standards, so that you have that opportunity in those 6 months to really understand the standards and how you can apply them and how you can meet them in your practice. So what is your mentor's role if they're not supervising you? Mentors are not supervisors. Their role is to provide general guidance and support to help you understand and apply practice standards, to help you improve your competence, and to help you apply principles of sound clinical judgment. Mentors will observe and discuss your clinical practice with you in relation to the standards. And there is an assessment component. Mentors do assess if you meet standards, the minimum expected standards during your mentorship, and they submit those reports to CASLPO at the midterm and at the end of the mentorship. So when I'm saying practice standards, what exactly am I referring to? Well, the practice standards of the college are the minimum performance expectations of all SLPs and audiologists practicing in Ontario in all practice settings. So these standards are outlined in the MSAT. Many of them are principles that are, they stand the test of time. They apply in every practice setting, and I'll show you some examples to give you a better idea. And then we also have area-specific minimum standards. For example, in speech-language pathology, there's assessment of adults and children by speech-language pathologists, and there's also a practice standard for dysphagia. So it's sort of a combination of overriding principles as well as some area-specific standards. That's what makes up the practice standards. So just to get a little bit more specific, in the MSAT, the standards are outlined as categories and then practice indicators that fall under each of those categories and that basically reflect that category. So the 5 categories are management practice, clinical practice, patient-centered practice, communication, and professional accountability. And within each of those categories, there are several indicators. So for example, in the category of clinical practice, one of the indicators is 2.5, which is I monitor, evaluate, and modify my intervention procedures based on patient outcome. So as you can see, this is a principle-based standard. It would apply in every practice setting. And this is one of the standards that you are reflecting on during your mentorship, discussing with your mentor, and then showing that you understand this standard and that you're able to meet it. Okay, so how do you get started with your mentorship? So after you become an initial registrant of CASLPO, you should review the mentorship program guidelines and discuss these guidelines with your CASLPO approved mentor. And then you will submit a mentorship contract to the college within 30 days of beginning your employment. So you start your employment and then you have 30 days to go over these guidelines, discuss them with your mentor, and then submit a contract. And the reason we say CASLPO approved mentor is because we do have criteria for mentors. We have 8 criteria, and they are outlined in the mentorship program guidelines. They're in a FAQ on our website. And they're also, I'll show you where you find these criteria on the website, but it's important for you to know that these exist so that when you are talking to your employer or talking to an SLP about whether they can mentor you, you should share these criteria, make sure that they're aware of the criteria so that your mentor can make sure that they meet these criteria before they agree to mentor you. So I'll show you where to find mentorship information on the website. When you go to the CASLPO website, you'll click on applicants, and then you will see a mentorship option in the left-hand bar menu. You click on mentorship, and it takes you to a mentorship overview page. And on that page, if you scroll down, there is a chart that has the mentorship program guidelines, the contract, and also the criteria for mentors. And then we also have lots of FAQs about mentorship there. I think there are 28 FAQs. So if you have any questions about mentorship, please visit the page and have a look at the FAQs. And you'll very likely find some information to help answer your question. Okay, so when we're talking about the mentorship contract, there are some important points that you'll discuss with your mentor. You want to discuss the start date of your mentorship, and that date must be on or after the date of your initial registration with the college. You're going to discuss the process and requirements for mentoring, review the standards in the MSAT, your patient care hours, your mentored guidance hours, discuss where, how, and when you'll meet your mentor and how often, how they will provide you with feedback. Will it be written, verbal? Will you have video calls once a week? And then we do ask you to identify a third party for conflict resolution. And that person does not have to be a CASLPO registrant. It doesn't have to be an SLP. It can be another person at your workplace who's in maybe a managerial role, an HR person, for example, who agrees to step in as a third party. So as I mentioned earlier, you and your mentor will use the MSAT, the Mentorship Self-Assessment Tool, throughout the mentorship period. So it is a tool that you are supposed to really use over the full 6 months of the mentorship. And the MSAT allows for the following to be done. So you can log into the tool and assess your own practice based on the standards, and I'll show you a little bit more of how that's done. Your mentor can log into the tool from wherever they are, and they are also giving you ratings on the standards, so assessing your practice based on the standards. You can upload evidence in the MSAT to show your mentor and yourself that you're meeting the practice standards, and there are comment boxes that you can fill out to comment on how you meet the standards. Your mentor can also send you a comment, or not send you, but put comments in the tool, and when you log in, you'll see your mentor's comments. There's a learning goals section that you complete in the MSAT. And then finally, as I mentioned, there is a midterm and a final report built into the MSAT that your mentor submits through the MSAT to the college. So you and your mentor will gain access to the MSAT when your mentorship contract is approved. So when you send in the contract, we here review the contract, we check your mentor, make sure they meet the criteria. And then when we approve your contract, you'll get an email from the college to say that the contract has been approved. You'll also get instructions in that email on how to log into the MSAT. Those instructions are also on the website. And then in terms of using the MSAT, filling it out and using the tool, there are instructions within the MSAT itself. And I'll show you where. So just going back to the website, where do you find information about the MSAT? Well, from that mentorship page, there's also an option there for mentorship self-assessment tool in that left-hand bar menu. If you click on it, it takes you to an MSAT specific page. And that's where you'll find a little bit of information about the MSAT. This is this green button that says access to the mentorship self-assessment tool. You click on that to get to the tool. And then there are FAQs, including how do I log into the MSAT. Okay, so a little bit more about the mentorship self-assessment tool. So CASLPO worked with a developer to develop this MSAT tool for the college. And the goal was to basically take the whole mentorship, big parts of the mentorship process and put them online. And the reason we wanted to do this was, to reduce paper, to make the process a little bit more efficient. A big one was to support distance mentoring, and I think we're realizing a lot during this time how important that's going to be. Because of the pandemic, it may be a lot more difficult for you to be in the same room with your mentor. You may be doing a lot more virtual care, and you may be also having a lot more correspondence with your mentor virtually. So because the MSAT is online and you can log into it from wherever you are, and your mentor can log in from wherever they are, it makes it a bit easier to use the tool to communicate and to track your mentorship. Just to let you know, depending on when you begin your mentorship, you may or may not see these practice standards, but these are new practice standards that are being added. The reason they're being added to the MSAT is because they are being added to the self-assessment tool that general registrants fill out. And as a general registrant, when you become one, you will also fill that tool out. But the MSAT is a reflection of that tool. And so these new standards are going to be in the MSAT as well. So you may see them, but basically we've listed the 4 of them here for you. There's basically going to be one on conflict of interest, a standard on clinical reasoning, and we are going to introduce something called the clinical reasoning tool more into the mentorship, hopefully by the end of this year or maybe next. There is an advertising practice standard that will be introduced and a professionalism practice standard. Okay, so these are some screenshots of the MSAT so you can have an idea of what it looks like. So when you log into the MSAT, this is the landing page. You'll see that in the top right-hand corner, there are resources for you as the mentee. And when the mentor logs in, it says mentor resources. On the left-hand side, there's a bar menu there that has the different sections of the MSAT that you'll be working on and filling out. So a section on professional practice standards and indicators, a midterm report, a learning goals section, and a final report. And in the center, there's a chart that basically shows you the timeline for completing each of those sections. And then guidance documents are also there for you, including instructions on how to use the MSAT tool. There are also instructions at the top of each MSAT section. So for example, if you go into the professional practice standards and indicators section, there are instructions at the top of the page of the section to guide you on how to work through and fill out that section. This is looking a little bit closer at the professional practice standards and indicators section. So here we're logged in as a mentee, which would be you, for example. And you can see the standards were in management practices and the indicator is 1.2. I maintain records which accurately reflect the services provided. That is the practice standard. You can drop down if you click on an arrow and see examples of meeting the standard. And then here in the yellow box is where you rate yourself on the standard. You provide a comment to explain, how you've met the standard in your practice. And you can also upload a piece of evidence or some documentation to show that you meet the standard. And when your mentor logs in, they will see the same thing. They'll be able to see your rating, your comment, and your uploaded evidence file. If there's one, there isn't one here, but there could have been. And then your mentor can give you a rating on the practice standard based on their observations and discussions with you. And they can also provide a comment in return. So just to recap and review, over the course of your mentorship, you will be assessing your own practice and reflecting on how you are meeting the minimum practice standards of CASLPO. You'll do that in the MSAT. You'll be providing comments and evidence to demonstrate that you are meeting the standards. You'll do that in the MSAT, as I just showed you. At the midway point of the mentorship, halfway through, we ask you to set 3 learning goals and to work towards achieving those goals. And you track that in the MSAT. So basically, by the midpoint of your mentorship, you would have been practicing for at least 3 to 4 months, and you'll probably have some idea of which standards you understand really well and which you maybe need to do some reading, maybe a webinar, talk to your mentor a little bit more. And so we ask you to make some specific goals to make sure that you understand all of the standards. And you will discuss your assessment, evidence, and learning goals with your mentor at the midterm and final evaluation meetings. And then you also are preparing 5 patient charts or patient records for your mentor to review at the midterm and final evaluation meetings. And that's so that your mentor can verify that you're meeting the record keeping standards. So your mentor will provide you with that general guidance on your professional practice. They'll provide you with guidance on the standards and how to apply them in your practice. At the midterm and final evaluation meetings, your mentor will be reviewing your MSAT with you, reviewing the 5 records for the record keeping standards, making sure that those are met, assessing and confirming that you're meeting the standards. They're doing that in the MSAT, and they're submitting those reports. And importantly, in the final report, we do ask your mentor whether they recommend you for a general certificate of registration based on the mentorship period. And what happens after the mentorship is completed. So assuming everything goes well and you complete the mentorship successfully and your mentor recommends you for general registration, you'll then get your general registration with CASLPO. So we do review the midterm and final reports, and we inform you when your mentorship has been successfully completed. And then congratulations, you become a general registrant of CASLPO. So you do have to do certain things to maintain your general registration. And those things are that you have to provide 750 hours of patient care or related work in audiology or speech language pathology during every 3-year period. And the 3-year period, the first one begins on the day that you are issued your general certificate of registration. And another thing you have to do to maintain your general registration is that you must meet the requirements of the quality assurance program. And that involves filling out a self-assessment tool online every year, having 3 learning goals for your practice every year and working towards meeting those goals, engaging in continuing education, and we call that continuous learning activity credits, or CLACs. And you may also be selected for a possible peer assessment. So the mentorship period really prepares you because you're doing all of these things during the mentorship. And so if you get selected for a peer assessment, you'll be somewhat prepared because you went through the mentorship period, which is nice. Okay, so that is the end of the mentorship section, and this is where I'll ask Jessica if we have any questions that have come through about the CASLPO mentorship.
Okay, so we have had a ton of questions. I've answered mostly all of them, and I have some for you, Samita, but I just wanted to say that if I haven't answered your question, I'm going to be sending you an email within the next 5 business days to answer your question. But Samita, I do have questions for you.
Okay.
The first one is, does a mentor need a certain number of years experience?
Yes, that's a good question. And yes, the answer is yes. They need to have at least 4 years of professional practice experience. And if you look at that criteria that I mentioned in the presentation, you'll see that I think it's the very first criteria out of the 8 that are listed there. If there's anything I miss, Colleen, please let me know. Okay.
So the next question is, I was briefly registered with AHIP, and was just starting my mentorship period before I got accepted into the audiology program, so never actually ended up practicing as an HIS. Do I have to include this info on my CASLPO registration?
Yes, you do.
Okay.
We require that any health profession that you have practiced, we would need verification of that registration. So there is a form in the application package that if you held a previous registration, you would send that form to your regulator, and it would be included in your application.
Okay.
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it has to do with a different profession. Yeah, and whatever mentorship they're referring to that they're saying they did, it's different from what we've been talking about today.
Samita, the next question is it possible to have 2 mentors?
Okay, good question. No, we don't ask you to have 2 mentors. In fact, we don't want you to have 2 mentors. We want you to have only 1 mentor. And we ask that that mentor be for your primary practice location. So basically, if you are working, usually this question comes up because people have multiple jobs and they think that they need to have a mentor for each job that they have, but you don't need to have a mentor for each job. You need to have 1 mentor who takes responsibility for providing you with the guidance, filling out your MSAT, and doing all of the things that we talked about, the mentor's role in the presentation. If you have another second job, your mentor would also be mentoring you for that other position. But you need to let your mentor know that you have another practice setting, the type of work that you're doing in that practice setting. And in terms of tracking your patient care hours, then you have to discuss that with your mentor as well. How are you going to track your patient care hours in that other setting? The other thing I'll add to that is many times it comes up that like somebody has a job in a school board and then they also work in maybe a hospital, for example. So the work that they're doing is very different in those 2 different practice settings. and they say, well, my mentor in this school board won't be able to mentor me for the work that I do in the hospital. So it may be true that your mentor doesn't have that clinical experience. And so in that case, we do allow mentors to have collaborators. So it's not another mentor, but it can be another SLP in the hospital, for example. That mentor who agrees to be a collaborator, they need to meet all of the criteria for mentors as well. But they could be providing some of the guidance within the hospital setting, and then basically talking to your mentor and reporting to your mentor and letting them know, that they've observed that you're meeting the standards in the hospital. But your designated mentor is the one who takes the responsibility to assess you, review the patient files, and fill out your MSAT and submit the reports to the college. So I hope that answers your question.
All right. So the next question I have is, on the MSAT, can you upload documents with sensitive information, such as patient name information, as evidence of meeting a specific standard? Or do you have to black out that information and or get consent first?
Okay, thank you for that question. So the MSAT is a secure system, and you can upload files into the MSAT that have personal health information of patients that may be sensitive. If it's possible for you to redact that information before you upload the file, then we would advise you to do that, just because it's probably better to do so. If your mentor works for the same employer as you, then usually employers and large organizations have standards around confidentiality. Obviously, we as a college, as a regulatory body, we have standards around maintaining confidentiality of patients and the importance of that. So your mentor, if they're viewing those files, they have to meet those standards for confidentiality, and obviously you have to also meet those standards. So you're going to be doing that. And obviously not sharing your password, making sure you log out of the MSAT on every, whenever you log in on any device, you log out. Yeah, so I think, yes, so the answer to your question is you can upload the documents, and the patient consent question, that's interesting. Colleen, do you have anything to add about whether they need patient consent?
Well, we do. There may be times when your mentor is observing you in your in the mentorship, and for those kinds of things, we do say that you should inform the patient that this is happening so that they are aware, and you should explain to them the reason for the mentorship and kind of get their consent of that observation. So yeah, there are times when you do have to get your patient's consent on mentorship things.
Yeah, for sure. If somebody's going to be observing your clinical session with the client, then you definitely need to get consent for that. In terms of whether you need consent to upload the documents into the MSAT, I think that because it's a college process that's required of you, you can upload those documents, and you don't necessarily have to get consent to upload the documents, but you do have to keep in mind that there are standards that you are expected to be meeting in terms of maintaining patient confidentiality and security of their personal health information. So you want to make sure you, as I said, log out of the MSAT, don't share your password, and if you can redact patient sensitive information from your evidence files, then you should.
All right, so the next question I have is, how do I obtain a mentor?
Go ahead, Samita.
Well, I think most people, sometimes it happens naturally as you're looking for a job. As Colleen said in the first half, it's usually a better way to go about it is that you look for your employment and then you explain to your employer, you know, I'm required to do this mentorship period and I need to be mentored. And usually then people will inquire and say, are there any SLPs who also work for this organization who can mentor me? So sometimes naturally you find your mentor that way. If you are unsuccessful at finding a mentor that way, then you can get in touch with the college and we can provide a list of general registrants who have agreed to be contacted for mentorship. And then you will need to reach out to those registrants and talk to them about the mentorship and the mentoring requirements and find out if they are able to mentor you. Did I miss anything, Colleen?
No, that's great.
You sounded great. The next question I have is, how would mentorship work if my first job, so I think they mean their primary practice location, is entirely through telepractice? Example, Tiny Eye.
How would my mentorship work? Okay, so you do have to find a mentor. It would be in that case, if you're doing exclusively virtual care, as I mentioned, you may be also then doing everything virtually with your mentor. So your mentor may be talking to you through video calls about the clients that you're seeing, discussing the standards with you virtually or over the phone or through email. They would be logging into the MSAT. Now, with patient records and things like that, you might have to find a secure way of sharing that information with your mentor. Again, the MSAT is a way to do that. If you're uploading evidence files into the MSAT, your mentor is logging in, the tool is secure, and they can view evidence files that way. But in terms of guidance that your mentor is providing, it would all be taking place then through over the phone or over real-time video calls. And you might have to figure out how your mentor can observe you while you're providing virtual care. Because as I said, some observation of your practice is mandatory. So you might have to figure out how that can be set up. Will your mentor be able to observe a virtual clinical session?
Yeah. Just another thing is that if you are working through telepractice only in Ontario, your employer also has to be from Ontario. So, for instance, if you were employed in another province to provide telepractice services in Ontario and your employer is in that other province, that wouldn't work in mentorship. You need to have employment in Ontario to be to complete your mentorship. So
Right.
just be aware of those kind of jurisdictional issues when you're doing telepractice, because for the initial certificate to happen, your employer does have to be in Ontario.
Right.
So that's it for questions. Any questions that weren't answered, I will be responding to via email within the next 5 business days. And if you have any other questions about mentorship, you can contact mentorship@CASLPO.com. That's all from me.
Okay.
Great.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming to our presentation. And as you can see, we have a bunch of links in this slide presentation, which will be available on our website in probably next week. I hope we can have it up for you, and along with a recording of this webinar. And we have a YouTube channel as well as a Facebook page. So if you want to go and like that, that would be great. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.